Brian Boyles, who is the Executive Director of Mass Humanities. Mass Humanities is our state humanities council. And I asked Brian to speak for a number of reasons. I think he's brilliant. I think he can give you a sort of a bigger sense, a bigger vision of what we are doing here through the lens of humanities. He also is, Mass Humanities has funded us over many years, from the first year of the Working Waterfront Festival in 2004, pretty much continuously. And we also, as I think I said in my opening remarks, received a large grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Mass Humanities matched the first of those grants, the planning grant that we had, and also has provided recent funding to help us create an online version of a portion of the new exhibit. We're incredibly grateful, and I'm very happy to welcome Brian Boyles to the stage. Please give him a round of applause.
Thank you, Laura. I don't think I'll ever get a better introduction than that, and it makes me even more eager to come back to from Northampton to New Bedford. Thank you to Rep. Cabral. Thank you to Congressman Keating. Thank you to Brendan and the board. This is an amazing day to be here and to celebrate. It's also just so great to see vaccinations happening here and to be able to be here not on Zoom, but actually face to face with you all. It's a little bittersweet to me because I have been telling people I've met on Zoom for the last year and a half that I'm about 6'4", and reality is now coming to strike. But it's great to also stand here though with New Bedford, and as people from New Bedford are now able to come back and embrace their history and embrace their heritage and meet with their neighbors again. It's a historic moment. On behalf of Mass Humanities staff and our board and our local board member, Lee Heald, I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity today to talk a little bit about the humanities, why this particular building, I think, is at the forefront of the humanities, not just in Massachusetts, but in the country, and why we think that the humanities should be part of the recovery coming out of the disasters we faced over the last year and a half. Since the start of the pandemic, Mass Humanities has invested more than $240,000 in grants to nonprofit organizations in this region. And that's big thanks to Congressman Keating, first of all, for the CARES Act grants that were able to keep people's staffs and rent and overhead intact. It's also really a credit to Rep. Cabral and his long-standing support for Mass Cultural Council, which has then allowed us to support the digital world and keep the doors open to a lot of institutions while they weren't actually able to welcome people physically. So that's been funding for the Fishing Heritage Center, that's been for the Whaling Museum, it's been for the New Bedford Preservation Historical Society, and for our newest grantees at DATMA and the South Coast LGBTQ+ network. This is a vibrant place. That public funding has kept that alive, and they deserve to hear our applause again, I think, for the work they've done to support it for cultural funding. Next week, and this is again thanks to Congressman Keating and to our Massachusetts delegation, we will announce opportunities for more than $1 million in funding for COVID relief that comes out of the American Rescue Plan. We'll also next week begin classes that we've been holding in partnership with PACE and UMass Dartmouth for our Clemente course. This course gives residents of low-income households the opportunity to resume their education, to study the humanities, to build education opportunities, and here in New Bedford this summer to begin to study the history of this region and to contribute their own stories to this history. And I think that's a big part of what's done here at the Fishing Heritage Center, and it's why I'm so thankful to be here today. So that's why I'm here. That's sort of the numbers and the work that we have supported. But the question I always get is, what are the humanities? What do they have to do with the fishing heritage and fishing industry? And what do they have to do with the recovery of this state and this country over the next few years? If you've been inside, or when you're about to go inside, look around. Look at the equipment that's on the walls. Look at the stories and the videos and the ropes. Behind every one of those is a person. It's the people that have held those instruments and have made things happen. And as the More Than a Job title of the exhibition infers, it's a community that's been built up over centuries now because of that. We believe that the humanities really live in those communities, that the humanities are the stories that we take from seeing that exhibition. They're the lessons we take from the past. They're the way we imagine the future. They're the morals we pass on to our kids. The last time I was in New Bedford, I was right before the pandemic. It was January of 2020, and we were visiting at the public schools offices here. And it was just after the earthquake in Puerto Rico. There were families coming in who had nothing on their backs, being enrolled in classes. There were people that worked for New Bedford Public Schools able to speak Spanish with them and French Creole with them, able to speak Quechuan languages with people that were coming in with their kids. Languages and translation, that's the humanities. That ability to use language as a tool to help your neighbor, that is what we believe in, and that's where we see this work heading. The Fishing Heritage Center is important, as Derek said, because there's an $11 billion impact that is happening here because of the fishing industry. The Humanities ask, and I think both Rep. Cabral and the Congressman mentioned this, they asked, what is behind that? Who are the people? What are their dreams? What have they learned from their mothers and fathers? That's work that we see inside, and that's why Laura Orleans is an exemplary humanist and a powerful force for this community, and I think for the humanities around the country. You might think of the humanities as dusty books or libraries or scholarship or archives, and all those things count. But it's the ability not just to hook up microphones, as she has done many, many times in her life, but it's the ability to gain trust over people who are very diverse, who have all kinds of things on their plate, who are working hard on boats every day and in warehouses, and not just to gain their trust to be interviewed, but to gain their trust that they feel that you'll protect the access to those stories, that you'll make sure they're respected, that they're seen in a larger context of the Massachusetts story. That's the humanities that we talk about. Inside today, you can see a boat captain fighting regulations that are holding it back. You can see a warehouse worker who's complaining about her aching back. You can hear questions. When's the last time you saw ice over the Great South Bay? You can hear dreams. If I learn English, perhaps I can work in a warmer building next year. The humanities are the value we place on each other's lives. They're the ways we express to one another that we matter. We talked about a minute ago the disasters this country has faced over the last year and a half, and they are not just pandemic related. They are that assault on the Capitol, and the humanities are the way to combat that. I started my career in post-Katrina New Orleans. I can tell you that this work matters. I can tell you that though we may not see burned out buildings around us or flooded out homes, we do know the difficulties at dinner tables right now to talk about what it means to be an American. We do know what it means to have struggles and disasters when it comes to those conversations, or what we looked at that day on January 6th. The humanities are important in bringing us back together to have a conversation, and a conversation we'll need if we're gonna recover and we're gonna build back better and more equitably. Every resident should see themselves in their local museum and in their library and in their cultural center. That's why this is a leader. That's why when we say someone was walking down the street, walked inside and saw themselves on the wall, that's kind of a revolutionary step in the world of museums. And I think that's why it's historic that we're reopening today, because this rebuilding that we're gonna have, it's places like this that we need to come back to. Yes, we need to come back to our jobs. Yes, we need to come back to our schools. But if people can see their place here, and they can see their place in a classroom. They can see their place at City Hall. They can see their place at a table to discuss what's going to happen in their community. That's why the Fishing Heritage Center is so important. I mentioned our support for the New Bedford Historical Society, and I'm not sure if Lee Blake is still mayor of New Bedford, but I know that she is one of its greatest champions. In 1838, Frederick Douglass came here. He went to 21 7th Street to the home of Nathan and Mary Johnson. And he found freedom. He gave himself a name. And then he went to the waterfront and he began to work. And in his famous narrative, he talks about the moment when he was actually first paid. He had escaped slavery, he had scars on his back, and he came to New Bedford. And he was actually able to get a job right on the waterfront, like many of you. He said, "It swelled my heart as I clasped this money, realizing that I had no master, that my hands were my own." You can see him in this exhibition. You can see people generation after generation, where they came here from Norway or they came here from Guatemala, where they have built up family businesses or they fled here fighting oppressive governments. You can see the humanities tease out the strands of the American dream. That dream is not about a big car, and it may not be about the jobs that used to be around, but it is about that connection, that line between Frederick Douglass and the seafood processor and you and me. That's what this does. And that's going to be really, really important as we try and weave this society back together after everything we've been through. Strengthening those ropes will pull us forward. That's the work of the Humanities. That's the work of the Fishing Heritage Center. And I believe that'll be the work of the recovery. I want to thank Laura, thank her board, thank all of you for having me here today. Thank you for doing this work.